and welcome back to me trying another vintage routine, and this time it's the 1980s. And this one is actually the decade I was born in, so I do have some memories of the products, the smells and the way cleaning looked like back then. So I thought it would be fun to step back into that routine and see what we can learn from it today. As always, I'll keep it simple and realistic because I know none of us have endless time or energy for cleaning. I'm using the Dairy Book of Household Management today, which is another book that my mum owned, so it feels a little bit nostalgic to flip through its pages. And as we start with our morning tasks, I'll explain a little bit more about the book and its recommendations, and then I'll go into more detail about the routine in a moment. What I find really interesting about this book is that it marks a shift. You can see cleaning routines starting to modernise, not just in the products but in the attitudes. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, I've been trying out vintage routines starting way back in the Victorian times. So at the moment I've covered 100 years of cleaning routines. And unlike the older routines, they laid out strict timetables. This one doesn't really give you a precise routine to follow. Instead, it talks about the kinds of tasks that needs to be done daily, weekly or periodically, and then encourages you to build your own routine around your lifestyle. And I actually really like that, because it feels so much more flexible and realistic, and very much in line with my own progress not perfection approach to things. Another reason I like this approach is because it is something I really believe in, that no cleaning routine is perfect for everyone. The best routines are the ones that you can adjust to your own needs and your own life. What's also interesting about this book is that it's the first one I've come across that actually suggests the whole household should chip in, instead of placing all of the responsibility on one person. And that really reflects the social changes happening in the 1980s. It was becoming much more common for women to work, which meant the rest of the family often helped out a little bit more at home. Not always, but we were starting to take that approach a little bit more. And at the same time, tradition did still linger. A lot of women did still choose to stay at home once they had children. Even though I was very young, I do remember this time really quite clearly. So many of my friends had mums who stayed at home, but there were just as many whose mums were working their own jobs and careers too. Families were still often traditional, married with children, but living together without marriage first was becoming much more normal too. And of course, culture was shifting in other ways too. Music was changing, fashion was changing. I can still remember now really clearly walking through the city with my mum and seeing punks everywhere with their bright hair and incredible clothes. It was amazing to me as a young child. As a child, I didn't understand what those changes meant, but I can remember being amazed by it. And looking back, it was a really interesting and unique time to grow up. But anyway, let's talk more about the routine I actually followed. There's this page in the book which lays out a really good list of the kinds of tasks you would include into a routine. So I picked out all of the daily tasks, at least the ones that are still relevant in a modern house, and then I added in a couple of the weekly ones as well. And honestly, this routine was so much easier to follow than any of the other vintage routines I've tried. It felt more relaxed, more flexible, and just a lot more manageable. If you haven't seen those other videos, I would definitely recommend that you check them out just so that you can see the difference. But anyway, I decided to take inspiration from some of the stricter routines that I've tried before and do the bulk of the tasks early in the day. So before breakfast, I had made the beds, tidied clothing away, aired the bedrooms, dusted the bedrooms if they needed it, opened up the other rooms to let some air in, tidied the towels, wiped the wash basin, wiped the toilet seat and handle, emptied the dishwasher, tidied the kitchen and got some laundry started. It does still look like quite a long list, but I grouped it together and tackled the upstairs jobs together and then the kitchen jobs together, which made it feel much more doable. And it didn't actually take too long at all. And it really did set me up really nicely for the rest of the day. It was almost like a reset before everything else began. The other thing that made a huge difference was not forcing myself into a strict early start. I didn't get up as early as I have for the other routines I've tried, and that felt like such a relief because I'm not a morning person. And then not sticking to a time schedule was also really helpful too. I could get a lot more done before breakfast and then actually sit down and enjoy my breakfast without the pressure of, oh, I'm already behind. It made the whole thing feel lighter and more sustainable. After breakfast, I focused on the living rooms in the house and went through the daily tasks that were listed there. And these are tidy and air the room, clean out the fire, which I didn't need to do, dust if necessary, remove dead flowers, empty waste bins, and tidy newspapers and magazines. Which, out of this list, there wasn't actually much for me to do. We don't really keep newspapers or magazines, I don't have a fire, and there weren't any flowers to clear out. And since I knew I'd be dusting later, I kept that for later in the day too. So it really came down to just a quick tidy up, nothing heavy or overwhelming. Then it was time for lunch, and I have to admit I was already noticing how much more relaxed I felt compared to the other vintage routines I've tried. I wasn't nearly as drained or tired, which was a nice change. This 1980s routine is definitely a lot less full on. Some of that is down to the changing lifestyles of the time. By the 80s, labour-saving devices were a normal part of most homes. Things like washing machines, vacuums, and even tumble dryers weren't just luxuries anymore. They were much more standard. And that shift really shows in this book, because the tasks overall are lighter and the attitude is just more relaxed. When I tried a 1950s routine, you could see how new technology was only just being introduced, which made the workload feel heavier and the routine stricter. The 1980s really reflects the move towards making housework easier and just more flexible. So after lunch, I moved on to a couple of the weekly tasks, which was to dust and vacuum, water plants, clean tabletops, and change flowers. This is actually a pretty short list, and I actually ended up with some free time in the afternoon, which is a first for me when I've been following any of these vintage routines. Part of that was because, again, I didn't really need to do some of the tasks. I found it interesting that this routine has quite a few tasks around looking after fresh flowers, and maybe it's just me, but I don't usually have fresh flowers in the house that often. I do have my Lego flowers, but they don't really need much attention at all. I did dust and vacuum though, and while that's only listed as a weekly task in this book, I usually do it more often because we have pets. And then I had free time, which was a real bonus, and it made the whole day feel less pressured and much more achievable, which is a big contrast because in all of the other videos following these routines, I have always been running behind, never ahead. time for dinner, and dinner in the 80s was still important as family time. I came from a family where meal times were always valued. They were social occasions, and it was always a home-cooked meal with minimal convenience food. But I know that that wasn't the case for everyone at this time. Many of my friends' families relied on convenience foods and microwave meals a lot more, especially if both parents worked. My mum, for example, was a childminder. I'm not sure exactly what the North American term would be. Maybe nanny or childcare provider? But anyway, she was trained and registered, and people would pay her to look after their children while they worked. She did this from our home, and she chose it because it worked around looking after me. And it's really interesting to think about that even though she worked, she structured it in a way that suited me rather than necessarily what she might have wanted for herself. She was really good at it, but I don't honestly know if it was the exact path she would have chosen if she was choosing for herself. But anyway, after dinner I filled the dishwasher and reset the kitchen ready for tomorrow. And if you've followed me for a while, you might have noticed that this routine is actually very similar to what I normally do. There's a little bit more emphasis on extra dusting and little details, but the bulk of the routine is pretty much what I stick to every day. It feels achievable, realistic, and much less overwhelming than a lot of the other routines I've tried. So while I'm shutting down the kitchen, I thought I'd share a few things I've learned from following this routine. The difference in social attitude between a housewife in the 1960s and the 80s is huge. And it's even huger if you go back to like the 1880s, which is where I started. Things just felt a lot more relaxed in the 80s, with a lot less emphasis on perfection. And that's something I really like. I also really like the idea that the book encourages you to devise your own routine. On the flip side, I can also see how this could feel a bit overwhelming if you don't know where to start. Interestingly, this was about the same time that other systems and routines were starting to be developed. Things like the sidetracked home executive system or the fly lady. And I have a lot of videos on those because I've tried both of those systems extensively. And I do wonder if methods like the she system or the fly lady method came about because of this slightly more relaxed attitude. Those systems helped give a little bit more guidance on how to structure your day, but still leave space to adapt. Looking after a house can feel overwhelming, especially if you're not naturally organised. And for me, I do have executive dysfunction. That means I struggle with day-to-day household tasks, and that's why I rely on systems to help keep things manageable so much. Overall, I really like this book. It gives you enough advice to know what tasks to include in routine, but it also allows enough space to be a little bit relaxed and create a routine that actually works for you and your home. And with that, my day following a 1980s routine is complete. I hope you enjoyed coming along. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you prefer a slightly more relaxed approach like this book, or do you like a system that breaks down every task in your day with timings and schedules? Neither way is wrong, it's just different things work for different people. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.